Okay, any announcements, George?
No, I just let's all turn our videos off so Sal gets full use of the bandwidth for all the videos. And Sal, it's all yours.
Okay. Did you start recording, George? George, did you start recording?
Yes, he did.
Okay. All right. So today we're going to look more at the assassination, and I just want to highlight some of the connections in this case with the case of the murder of John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, and also the murder of Officer Tippit, associated with the JFK assassination. Some of the connections: we have no ballistics that match the gun, the bullet, and the person for JFK. We have no ballistics for MLK of a match between the gun, the bullet, and the person. On RFK, again, no ballistics that matches the gun, the bullet, and the person. And presumably, we have the bullets that came from the deceased, and we have the weapons from the alleged perpetrator. On JFK, we're told that he is hit with a bullet. We see that he is hit with a bullet in the right front of his head, but we're told the bullet came from the rear. With Bobby Kennedy, we're told that the bullet, we have evidence that the bullet entered from the rear of his head, but we're told that it came from the front. Bullet burn marks in the rear neck of Bobby Kennedy indicates fire at close range. The attacker, however, Sirhan, is moving towards Bobby Kennedy and never gets closer than about a foot. So what you have to say is Sirhan had to shoot Bobby Kennedy from the front by reaching behind his head and shooting at close range. With JFK, the weapon is left on the stairwell leaving the school book depository in a propitious location for the police to be able to find it. With MLK, the weapon is left in a doorway to an alcove to a business that is open and operating, Canopies, the game place. With RFK, the weapon was seized from the alleged suspect at the scene. So the weapons are, the kill weapons are always readily available. However, we still don't have ballistics evidence that connects that weapon with the bullet. JFK, we're told he's a lone nut. MLK, we're told he's a lone nut. RFK, we're told it's a lone nut. A lot of similarities. The ballistics evidence from the Warren Commission shows the base of the bullet cartridge with firing pin markings. They can't connect it with, here we have one of the strongest pieces of evidence implicating Oswald is Commission Exhibit 399, a bullet whose markings conclusively prove that it was fired from the Oswald rifle found in the book depository. But was this bullet involved in the assassination? It was not found in Kennedy or Connolly's body or in the presidential limousine. Instead, it appeared on a stretcher in Parkland Hospital after the victims were brought there. Was it planted? Perhaps by Jack Ruby, who was allegedly seen there by a reporter. Other aspects of the firearms and ballistics evidence follows the same maddening pattern, whether the subject is the Mannlicher Carcano rifle, the shell casings found on the 6th floor of the book depository, the paper bag purportedly used to carry the rifle into the building, or the casings found at the scene of the Tippit shooting. The hard evidence in this case turns out to be rather spongy. Besides rifle markings, ballistics evidence can be subjected to spectroscopic or neutron-activated analysis to try to determine whether fragments came from the bullet. The FBI conducted spectrographic tests, but then suppressed them. And so all of it remains a matter of controversy. With MLK, ballistics tests could not prove that the rifle dropped outside the boarding house. A Remington 30-06 game master either did or didn't fire the fatal shot because the gun did not create distinctive grooves on the bullet as most guns do. We're going to hear from a firearms expert about that. That weapon was not the weapon, Martin Luther King III said. You're going to kill somebody and then drop the gun right there? Ray claimed that he had given the gun to Raoul, but only Ray's fingerprints were on the gun. With RFK, criminalistics professor Herbert McDonald has signed an affidavit in 1973 stating that a bullet removed from RFK's neck, exhibit number 47, could not have been fired from Sirhan's gun. He further stated that based on the differing number of grooves, it could not have been fired from the same gun as exhibit number 54, a bullet removed from victim William Weasel. In a 1974 public hearing, California State Crime Lab veteran Lowell Bradford concurred. So what we have is this evidence that in all three cases, there's a lot of similarities in all three cases, comes up to be dubious. Let's have a look at things.
Had TV in his room, and he had written on the back of this TV, Martin Luther Coon. He was clearly outraged by Martin Luther King. Here's a man who scored all his greatest triumphs in the state of Alabama, Birmingham, Selma, Montgomery. Ray, he viewed these victories for King as an insult to Wallace's good name. I think in his own mind, he was beginning to have this kind of a duality. He was setting these two personalities off of each other in his own mind.
Now, I want you to understand what I'm suggesting here is that, again, if this is a professionally orchestrated assassination, this narrative would be something that would have been introduced so that we can make him enigmatic, but also present him as somebody who would be motivated to go and kill Martin Luther King. And what is being suggested is that James Earl Ray somehow had some political belief, something that he really cared about, that he was going to go and perpetrate an assassination because it insulted his morals. In my view, that is not believable.
Right.
Oh, sorry. Again, going again. Why would it do that? Hang with me just a second here. All right, let's see, when they sit there too long, somehow they lose position. No. What is this possible? Okay, let me try this one. I had, I wish I could figure out where these mysterious things come from. But I can't. I just don't get it. Why it would just shut down in the middle of it. Because okay, we'll get it straight yet. Let me try this one. It's kind of out of sync, but that's okay. All right. Let me try this one. Share.
As I was watching Dr. King, I saw him look over toward the boarding house. And then whenever he looked back, like he was going to look into the
Hard
parking
to hear
area,
the sound.
that's when he come up off of the grating, and that's when he was shot. I would say I was the only one.
The sound coming through?
A little weak.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just check one more thing. Yeah, no, it should be right. Okay. Good. Okay.
And that's when he was shot. I would say I was the only one that saw him get shot, actually get shot from the front. And it's not no pleasant sight. I felt very bad inside that this had to happen in Memphis, Tennessee.
The shame of fireman George Lonarchy watching Dr. Martin Luther King through a police spy hole at the moment of his death was soon to be shared by many as the weight of world condemnation came down on the city of Memphis on the 4th of April, 1968. This was the killing of a major world figure. How could they have allowed it to happen? There were even suspicions that the Memphis authorities were accessories to the murder and involved in a cover-up. Over 20 years later, the man convicted of King's murder, James Earl Ray, still protests his innocence. In this film, we show new evidence that there was indeed a conspiracy and that the trail leads into the heart of government itself.
Your position is that you are completely innocent?
Yes. I don't have no responsibility for it. I did commit certain, they probably consider criminal offenses, but they were nothing serious. I probably wouldn't got over 5 or 10 years for them, aggregated.
Would you say that those criminal offenses were related to the case?
No, most of them are related. See, I escaped from Missouri prison in July 1967 and went to Canada. Most of them are related to that false driver's license and fictitious names and all that type of thing. And there's nothing really serious.
Obviously, an individual had to pull the trigger. I'm not 100% sure if it would be James Earl Ray. I really don't see how that could be the case. It's possible, but I believe there was involvement by James Earl Ray, but what the magnitude of the involvement was, I don't know. I think there were a number of forces. I always say the forces of evil. Who that represented, I really don't know. I would hope that it wouldn't be the government.
You see, when there's an assassination, you have to have a lone nut, because a lone nut can kill somebody for no reason. If you admit that 3 or 4 people were involved, or that there was, to use an overworked term, conspiracy, then you have to say, well, the conspiracy had a reason. Well, they don't ever want to face that reason. What was the reason why Kennedy was killed? What was the reason why King was killed? By having a lone nut, you don't have to ask that question.
We concluded.
Okay, let me try this other one. See if I can get it working.
Exclusive corporate funding for American Experience is provided by Liberty Mutual. Nation funding is.
He grows up in poor white dysfunctional family. In a period of economic collapse.
The Ray family is so poor that at one point they start essentially cannibalizing their own house for firewood, and piece by piece, just kind of ripping it apart to get through the winter.
All right, let's hope this one plays properly.
Even among the poor working to have this kind of a duality. He was setting these two personalities off of each other in his own mind.
Ray probably didn't consider himself a racist. He probably considered himself just a good observer of the reality of life. He grows up in poor white dysfunctional family. In the period of economic collapse.
The Ray family is so poor that at one point they start essentially cannibalizing their own house for firewood, piece by piece, just kind of ripping it apart to get through the winter.
Even among the poor working class whites that James Earl Ray grew up with, he was at the lowest end of that. He couldn't afford the nickel for lunch. His teachers actually put in his school records that they found him, quote, repulsive. They found him aggressive. He failed the first grade. You're talking about somebody who was an outcast even among his peers.
Ray and his brothers want to find somebody who's responsible for their circumstance in life. And there were always likely victims for that scapegoating. Southern part of Missouri, where he grows up, was very much like the hill country of the South. White, poor, working class, bitterly anti-black.
It was called Little Dixie, actually. Blacks were just people who were even lower than you, and they were the people that you pushed down in your view of the world.
In those days, white men had pride in their race because frequently that's the only thing they could have pride in. The Rays may have had absolutely nothing, but in those days and times, at least they could say they were white.
In 1967, James Earl Ray is sitting inside Missouri State Penitentiary, what's called Jeff City. He's a career criminal. He has committed dozens of crimes, robberies of grocery stores, robberies of paycheck stores, taxi cabs, office buildings, whatever else that he gets away with. Finally gets caught in robbing a grocery store with a gun, and he gets sent to Jeff City. He's done time already at 2 other prisons that aren't easy, but Jeff City is different for him. He tried to plan to escape from his 2nd year in there. Ray wanted out.
Civil disobedience drive in Washington. Dr. King said Congress has dragged its heels in efforts to uplift the economic levels of the poor.
Now this has brought about a great deal of bitterness, anger.
There's rumors swirling around Jeff City about a bounty for the head of Martin Luther King. Some said it was $50,000, some said it was $100,000.
A lot of the white inmates of Jeff City had straight racist views. There was, in fact, an operating equivalent of a Klan operation inside. So if you were a white inmate who hated blacks in Jeff City, you might sit around and say, too bad we're in here. There's over 50,000 for somebody who can put a bullet in that preacher out there.
It was early in the morning, and Ray was working in the bakery. This was the morning that he was going to escape. He went down to a loading dock area where the bread from the bakery was being cooled and got into one of these boxes that the bread was going out on and had a false bottom placed on top of him. The box is placed inside a truck, and the truck is waved on and goes out of the prison. When the truck comes to a stop, he just jumps off the truck and takes off down railroad tracks. It's important to understand this was a maximum security prison. This is not an easy place to spring from. It shows something about Ray's personality, that he's very patient, he plans months ahead.
He had a lot of street smarts, a lot of jail and prison smarts, a cunning mind. No one would call him brilliant, but it would be a mistake to think that he was dumb.
When he escapes, he doesn't have very much on his person, but one particular artifact that he will have with him for the next year is his prison radio, a transistor radio. Ray was a news junkie. He was fascinated by the news.
Cloudy, chance of showers late this afternoon.
I think he thought that he was a much bigger fish than he was. He thought when he escaped from prison that he was going to be all over the news. J. Edgar Hoover would be on TV saying, you know, James Earl Ray's escaped, we need your help to find him, kind of thing.
Ray hoped to be on the FBI's most wanted list, and lo and behold, he didn't make it.
Instead of being elated at escaping, he's actually disappointed, because what he wanted more than the anonymity of escape was the notoriety of publicity, of recognition.
After Ray escapes, there's something very restless about him. He's always wanting to move on to the next place. He can't stay in any one place very long.
After Chicago, he goes to Canada for a month. He hangs out in Montreal. Then he goes to Birmingham and he buys a 1966 Mustang. Then he spends a little bit of time in Mexico, hanging out in Puerto Vallarta. He's with the prostitutes. He's having a great time.
He's got a little bit of money he saved up from selling contraband in prison, and he probably pulled off some robberies along the way, though he never gets caught.
Ray, he looks very ordinary, doesn't draw attention to himself, and he's great at staying in the background.
Part of this is just his personality, and part of it is the fact that he's a fugitive, and he needs to move on.
James Earl Ray comes into LA in November 1967, and he has an unusual time, to say the least, for an assassin. James Earl Ray is not a typical assassin. There is no diary that says, I must kill MLK, I must kill MLK, I must kill MLK. It may have been in the back of his mind, may have been something he thought about, but he wasn't acting on it.
New band spray stops over. I'll enjoy that.
Our guest today on Meet the Press is the former governor of Alabama, George C. Wallace.
Governor, do you think a man can be elected president of the United States today who has a widespread reputation as a racist?
Well, of course, a racist is someone who dislikes people because of color. And of course, I do not dislike any of the handiwork of God. I might point out that the best...
Ray has never been a joiner. He had never really thrown in his lot with any particular political party or political movement. But Wallace really captivated him. And I think he really believed that Wallace could be the next president.
The next president of the United States, the Honorable George C.
Wallace was essentially a racist.
I said, yes, our necks are red from working in the sun.
But he became a national figure. He was famous. And he was famous for being staunch about black people.
I draw the line in the dust
and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny. And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
And so what we have is Ray is being characterized. It may be him. This may be a correct characterization of him. But what we have is he, at the very least, is being associated with these ideas, and that, you know, he is politically motivated to go and join George Wallace's campaign. Now, understand, he is an escaped prisoner. He's an armed robber, is what he is. He is a guy on the run. Where the heck? I mean, you can sell stuff from the commissary in prison and make some money, but not enough to go take a vacation in Mexico. But he's traveling to Canada. He's traveling to Mexico. He's bought a car. He's gone out to California. I mean, he's moving across the country. Last time I checked, all of that costs money. And somehow James Earl Ray has access to that money. Let me get to next one. This is at 10:36. Okay. Stop the share. Let me get that right again. Sorry. Got that on share.
The state's case is that at 6:01 p.m. on April the 4th, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, James Earl Ray shot Dr. King with one bullet from a high-powered rifle. King was standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. The state said that Ray fired from the bathroom window of a rooming house 200 feet away. He then fled the scene, dropping a bundle, including the rifle with his prints on it, in a shop doorway. Then he drove off in his white Mustang down Main Street moments before the police arrived. James Earl Ray had been almost a year on the run from the Missouri State Penitentiary, where he'd been serving a 20-year sentence for robbing a supermarket. Ray claims that in July 1967, he met a mysterious character called Raoul in Montreal. Over the next 8 months, he carried out various assignments for Raoul, taking packages across the Canadian and Mexican borders for money. Raoul gave Ray $2,000 to buy a Mustang car. In late March 1968, Ray says that Raoul instructed him to purchase a rifle and bring it to Memphis as a sample for a gun-running deal. Ray says that at 3 p.m. on April the 4th, he rented a room in a flop house on Main Street, as previously agreed with Raoul. Later, Raoul asked Ray to leave while he met up with gun dealers.
So I went down and got the Mustang. I don't know what time it was that time. I guess it was 10 minutes till 6. My recollection may be wrong. I thought it was 3-4 blocks north and 3-4 blocks west, and stopped at the service station and asked him to fix a tire, if they could fix a tire. And this guy was, he said, no, we're too busy this time of day. So then I drove around. I was going to circle right back and park the car same place that I picked it up. When I got back up there, I seen, I think there was a squad car blocked off the street. Now, I don't know if he's right there at the intersection or he's about halfway down, but the street was blocked off, and I seen 2-3 people running around down there. So I said, well, I better not go down there. The police running around here. So I turned left, drove down through a predominantly black section. So after a while, I got on a main street. I was going to call this telephone number in New Orleans and find out if they could contact Raoul and see if anything happened there, because I thought maybe being some guns around there, some type of raid or something. Well, anyway, when I was driving out there, they said something about, I had radio and said something about Martin Luther King had been shot. I didn't think too much about that. And then about 10 minutes later, when I was on the outskirts of Memphis, or maybe I was actually Mississippi, they said that they were looking for a white man in a white Mustang in connection with the shooting. So I decided then that I better, move on out of there. I drove on and cut off and went to Atlanta. And from Atlanta, went on to Canada, caught a bus.
For 20 years now, Ray has claimed that he was framed for the assassination of Dr. King by Raoul, who, he believes, was a professional gunman. If the assassin had fired the shot from the bathroom window, he would then have had to get out of the bath, put the rifle in its box, run to his room to pick up the bundle, then run 85 feet across the hallway, go down the stairs, drop the bundle in the shop entrance before walking to his car and driving away. All rather implausible. It would have required split-second timing before the first policeman arrived at the scene. Veteran assassinations investigator Harold Weisberg has obtained more FBI documents on the King case than anyone else. He was one of the first people to cast doubts on the state's case against Ray in his book, Cover Up.
That's ridiculous. He's required to have gone to his room in the flop house and picked up the widest collection of junk, bobby pins, cans of beer that hadn't been opened. You know, a guy has been a crime like that and he's fleeing for his life. You're going to pick up a couple cans of beer or a bobby pin? The box didn't hold the rifle. He had to put the rifle in that. All sorts of other junk, and a ridiculous collection of it. The one thing that bundle served to do was to point a finger at Ray.
We were in the fire station when we heard the shot.
One of the first policemen to arrive at the balcony was Sheriff's Deputy Vernon Dollahite.
Officer Maley and I proceeded north on Mulberry to Hewling Street. We turned west on Hewling and ran up towards Main, and there's an alley behind the buildings where the shot was fired from. I directed Officer Maley to take up a position there. He was armed with a shotgun and a pistol and guard the alley. I proceeded on up to Main Street. I turned to go south on Main Street, checking those buildings. I proceeded on south, checking all the doors of all the establishments. There's one place called Jim's Bar and Grill. The door was open. I entered the building and I told them there's been some trouble. Everybody stay inside. And I backed out of the building. At that time, I observed a rifle, a blue suitcase, and a green blanket laying on the sidewalk.
Did you see the package with the rifle when you went into Jim's Grill?
I did not. After I came outside, I then turned to my right, facing south. I immediately saw it. I feel sure that I would have observed it as I came down the sidewalk, because it was very noticeable, and I would have seen it.
How long were you in Jim's Grill?
Not more than 10 to 12, 15 seconds at the most.
3 different policemen have claimed to be the first to find the weapon. Astonishingly, even after 20 years, this question remains unresolved. But the fact is that Dollahite was certainly in Main Street within less than 2 minutes of the shooting.
I think it's very significant that a bundle of the alleged murder weapon appeared within 2 minutes on the street after the assassination. I think it's also significant that he didn't see it the first time that he came out, and it is very possible that someone was lying in wait in the entranceway to the rooming house, and then only came out and dropped it quickly after he went into Jim's Grill.
Do you think that person was the assassin, or was it somebody else?
I don't believe that person was the assassin. I believe that the person who dropped the bundle in all likelihood had a very specific role to play, and it was placing the bundle there. I don't believe the assassin was in the rooming house at all, and that this is just a part of disinformation.
So where do you believe the shot was fired from?
After considering this issue over many years and balancing the variety of factors, I think it's quite likely that the shot was in fact fired from behind the rooming house, under the cover, from within the cover of the brush and the bushes at the rear of the rooming house.
Solomon Jones.
And so, as you know, that's a lot of stuff there. But what we have is, James Earl Ray. If if I take my theory, and it's just a theory, I don't have evidence to support it, I must emphasize that, but my theory is if he is set up as the patsy, as the suspect that they're going to give to the police so that police close the investigation and don't continue it and get deeper into people who are really involved. So what we have is James Earl Ray is in prison. There's a bounty on Martin Luther King, which, you know, can be an incentive for James Earl Ray to want to escape, try to get that money, let's say, and maybe he has help to get him out. And so he is, I'm going to use him to go and meet with other people who are going to start to arrange for him to perpetrate a crime that is going to get him the reward, the bounty that's been placed on Martin Luther King. And so he goes to Montreal and he meets with this guy, Raoul, who could be, again, someone who's a part of a larger conspiracy to set up James Earl Ray. Mind you, setting him up and making him a suspect isn't something that you have to do in a day or two. You can work on this for several months as you put together your plan for an assassination. And you have the different components that have to be a part of that plan. Planting evidence, having a suspect, having a real killer do the kill and extract them from the scene of the crime so that, you know, there's no evidence to go after them with. You know, it's putting together all of those pieces, and James Earl Ray, according to my theory, is simply one piece of that. And by the way, what happens is the reporters and investigators don't look at the broader questions. Where did his money come from? Could this be part of a bigger scheme? See, it is, look, we got the guy, we've got the weapon, you know, it all the parts and pieces fit together, you know, case closed. Why do you want to ask all these other questions and go look for more complicated answers when we have a simple one sitting right here before us, which is what the CIA guy Prouty is emphasizing.
King's chauffeur was standing under the balcony when King was shot.
I interviewed Solomon Jones in the lobby of the St. Joseph Hospital approximately about 7:05. This was
Authorities that it's never been filmed before. Where's the evidence that this rifle killed Dr. King? We invited one of the most renowned ballistic experts in America, Herbert McDonald, to review the ballistics evidence in the actual bathroom from where the shot is alleged to have been fired. He's using an identical rifle.
I'm standing on the floor. The bathtub is no longer in this physical configuration. With this setting, with this scope on this rifle and that window at 3.5 inches, I'm looking partially into the window. But that only cuts the light down very slightly. I have a very excellent view of the balcony. With this scope, it would be an easy shot for someone like myself who knows how to breathe and position themselves for a shot and to very gently squeeze the trigger. An inexperienced person, it would be a more difficult shot, considerably more difficult, especially standing in the bathtub.
There is no evidence that Ray ever fired a rifle in his life. That's a mechanical skill, and to be a good shot, you've got to keep it in just like a concert pianist or a concert violinist practices daily.
The only piece of physical evidence that appeared to link the rifle to this bathroom was a dent in the windowsill.
That is the exact width and length of an indentation that I examined in the windowsill in Memphis in 1974. The dent, therefore, since it has no microscopic characteristics, it has no individual characteristics, and certainly does not reflect either the geometry or any of the microscopic scratches on the barrel. They just would not be reproduced. This dent could never have been made by this weapon.
Now the point about the dent is that it was used to demonstrate as evidence that the rifle was fired from this room. They said there's a dent from the rifle on the windowsill, therefore it was fired from this room.
That's ridiculous. That dent does not prove anything. I took several pictures of the bullet, including every land and groove. This is just one of them. I had been told that the bullet was so badly mutilated that identification would be impossible. There is a great amount of lands and groove area for comparison. I would say that the FBI's decision not to test fire the rifle when they want to see if a projectile came from a specific rifle was a very poor case of judgment. Their reasoning that it was mushroomed and distorted so badly that it was unsuitable for comparison purposes is absolutely ludicrous. It had excellent characteristics, and they should have tested it.
Was the FBI's failure to test the weapon just incompetence, or more ominously, are we beginning to pull back the veils of conspiracy and cover-up among the authorities? Consider the actions of the Memphis Police Department.
Usually when King would come to Memphis, well, even I, if he was at the church or something, we would, maybe I'd have maybe 20 men within that block. He had plenty of security. We knew he was coming. We'd have men at the airport to meet him, and we tried to give him more security than we could give him.
In the 1960s.
I certainly knew of plans that were intended to bring about an assassination. For example, in the case of Castro. So they created an organization called Mongoose. Mongoose was the cover word for it. Now, the objective of the Mongoose program was to assassinate Castro by any means. We even used mafia hitmen, skilled mechanics, skilled killers. Now, there's no reason to believe that Mongoose ended when somebody decided that, well, we're not going to kill Castro this year, we'll let it go. But Mongoose is an assassination incorporated organization.
From your experience in government, Fletcher, do you think it conceivable that a secret intelligence unit could have planned and carried out the assassination of Martin Luther King?
You needn't have to include the word intelligence unit. It's just a secret unit. And there's no question about it being a unit. Anybody that thinks today that either Kennedy assassination, either one of them, or the King assassination, and others that we might go into, were done by individuals, just doesn't understand the business at all. The easiest way to see that the program is laid on in a team effort, carefully planned and carried out, begins after the murder. How to get them out of there and how to cover the thing so people don't realize that a team of gunmen did the job. Martin Luther King was registered on the first floor. Somebody went there ahead of time and told the landlady of the motel that he didn't want to be on the first floor, he wanted to be on the second floor. Nobody in King's party had made that contact. You see, that's the advanced planning. Then afterwards, all the things that happened, the chase of Ray halfway around the world and all the other things that came up, are a cover plan which is so complete that even to this day, no one has broken the system completely, and you can't get into the courts anyway.
They claim
Okay, so my argument really coincides with the point that's being made by Colonel Prouty, that this is really a broader plan orchestrated to, hand over James Earl Ray as the suspect. Mind you, what we've got with Martin Luther King is he is agitating against the mistreatment of Black people and slavery and segregation, things that are the pillar of America. He's threatening some very powerful people. And it's not just to be able to hold Black people down. It is to keep the tool of racism as a political tool so you can manipulate the American democracy. And if you can manipulate the American democracy, you are then writing the rules of the game. And if you want to write the rules of the game, you need to be able to get voters to do things you want them to do, to vote for people you want them to vote for who will carry out your intention to change the rules of the game. And the tool that has worked for centuries was racial animus. No matter how unfounded in fact, all the the stuff about how Black people are inferior and all of that, no matter how much you disprove that, as long as there are people of power that continue to give it legitimacy, it works for a wide spread of the population, and they will get out and they will vote based on racial animus. And again, this isn't to support one political force or another, but if you listen to Governor DeSantis with his acceptance, his winning speech the other night, he is declaring that he is standing up against woke America. I'm sorry, but that is the dog whistle. And this is, there's a lot written about dog whistle politics. The whole idea about his taking a position against woke, a position against critical race theory, all of that is the dog whistle proclaiming him as the racist candidate. Okay, with that, George, we can open up for discussions.
Okay, we'll use the raise the hand function for comments and questions, and also you can turn your videos back on, and so we can see the questioner. A lot to digest, Sal.
Okay.
There we go. Tim?
You muted yourself again.
There we go. I'm just wondering, the assassination of the two Kennedys and Martin Luther King, who, if the CIA organized it, engineered it, who's behind the order to give the CIA to do this? I'm sure they didn't, unilaterally decide themselves, well, this is what we're going to do, and the heck with what anybody else wants. I've never believed that Kennedy's assassination, Martin Luther King and Robert and others were these sole people. It was just too simple, too, 1, 2, 3 type of stuff. So who or what is behind this?
Well,
beyond the CIA?
Yeah, as I've said before, I can only suggest a theory.
Oh, sure.
Because I don't have evidence to support, the theory. But as we talked about in the Kennedy assassination, why would somebody want Kennedy killed? And put forth that Kennedy was starting to act in favor of civil rights legislation. He had in the Bay of Pigs invasion, he had refused to allow American troops to be able to support the invasion, and that invasion hinged upon there being air support from America. So the anti-communist issues were there that became motivations to want to kill Kennedy. And so you had the Bay of Pigs. Then in the Cuban Missile Crisis, there were forces that wanted to say, let's have a nuclear fight with the Russians now. It's going to happen sooner or later, and we're in the position of power now, so let's go do it. And Kennedy opposed that. So when you look at that, the people who would have wanted that done would have been at very powerful echelons within, you know, the American political system and the people who support. Mind you, when I say the American political system, it's not the people you would see on TV, it's the people behind the scenes who are providing the funding and pulling the strings and all of that. We had J. Edgar Hoover was virulent in his anti-communism and in his racism. J. Edgar Hoover referred to Martin Luther King as butthead, and you know, burrhead is what he called him. And so, you know, there are people within that milieu, you know, the John Foster Dulleses, the Allen Dulleses, the J. Edgar Hoovers, and others like it, who would have had the power to initiate something. Now, how they would initiate it, my belief is that they wouldn't assign it to someone, you know, in the FBI. They would have someone who's a project manager managing outside contractors and orchestrating these kinds of things. And it would all be very much removed from the agency, be it the CIA or the FBI, where there's a lot more people who work outside than work inside.
and you couldn't follow the money, of course.
You couldn't follow.
They knew what trails not to leave. Do you think that's why Johnson just refused to run again? That he could see the handwriting on the wall, that he was you know, supporting civil rights. He was wanted to get out of the war and all these other things. I mean, those are against that power group as well.
You know, I think the Johnson decision to not run, it's difficult for me to place myself in his shoes. The Vietnam War was tearing him apart. And the pressure that's on him is enormous. The civil rights stuff is enormous, but he's put all of his political capital on the line, and then he gets betrayed by Martin Luther King. And I just think at a certain point, he just said, "To hell with it. I've had it."
Yeah.
And I'm just, and I think he wanted them to beg him to run again. He wanted them, you know, but so I don't know the reason. That's just my best guess.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sal?
Yes.
This comes from last week, but as soon as J. Edgar Hoover said, look for an escaped convict, I thought, now, as soon as there was the assassination, I'd say, go look for a white supremacist. I mean, it sounds like he knew exactly who they were going to pin it on. Because as soon as he was assassinated, that isn't the first type of person you'd ever think of going after him. You'd say somebody in the South that was, you know, KKK or something like that. But, you know, escaped convict? Where did that come from?
Well, I don't.
Yeah, very much like he knew who they were going to pin it on it to me.
Oh, sure, it's a good point. I hate to sound like I'm defending J. Edgar, but it wasn't. You know, when at that point in time, when you looked at wanting to research fingerprints to find a suspect, it was a labor-intensive exercise that could take a lot of time, and I think that, you know, he's as I think a lot of investigative people are, when you're looking at, we've got to go find a needle in a haystack. How can we narrow that haystack, you know, into something that we might get lucky on and start to do that? So it's not that unusual. And I would think I would think of that as a good idea. Because, and mind you, the people who are going to be escaping out of prisons and stuff like that are going to have those kinds of affiliations that I would think of from a broader picture as well. So it's not that unusual, but I would also be looking at the same time at possible suspects from the Klan and other racist groups, without a doubt, sure.
Penny and Dean?
Hi, thank you. Sal, we heard several times today the expression bounty. There was a bounty on his head. Who put up a bounty? I mean, is that a group that's put in money, or was it the government that set up a bounty on King? What does that mean?
Yeah, remember the people that we looked at a couple of episodes ago, Sam Bowers and others like him. These were like the head of the Klan that were very vocal in their animosity towards King. So I would suspect it would come from I don't think that it's been documented who was offering the bounties, because that stuff would be disguised and certainly something that I thought needed to be much more thoroughly investigated, but wasn't. But I would suspect it would be coming from the people like Sam Bowers and the people who were leading the Klan. Yeah.
So these are individual people, not necessarily in an organized group. Is that what you're saying?
No, I would think they would come from, being ahead of the Klan in Alabama or Mississippi, whatever. Because remember the frustration that, when LBJ does the Voting Rights Act, Mississippi's head exploded. And there's all kinds of groups. We talk about the Klan as one overarching group, but there's loads of little independent, associations like that. And I would suspect it would have come from there. Yeah.
Thank you.
But Penny, let me also say that again, if I was organizing an assassination and I was an outside contractor given a contract to do this, my contract wouldn't say it's to go and assassinate. It is to do some special ongoing services contract to assist, the planning agency of whatever. So it would be a broad kind of contract, which would mean I would get qualified as a contract. I would bid and then I would get selected. So now I'm going to get on the bidding process doesn't say which specific projects I'm going to work on. It's just an ongoing services contract. Then once I've been accepted, now I get assignments that aren't going through a bidding process, which you would know about. My assignment might be to study the water infrastructure in Alabama. But what I would be doing, and I would do stuff that would, report about the water situation, but at the same time, I would be orchestrating an assassination. And one of the things that I would throw into if I want people to be looking at the Klan or someone like that, not me, I might throw a bounty out there and be willing to pay it. And it would be, just part of the overall master plan for perpetrating this crime. Just as Prouty was talking, he's saying, the people looking at this, they're just looking for the one guy who did it. They're not looking at the overall who's behind it. And that's why I'm saying that coincides with my theory of the case. But if I were that outside contractor, that is how I think I would put it together. And I would also put together a suspect that I'm going to hand over to them. I would also put together evidence that I'm going to hand over to them. Mind you, here comes police. They're checking out the doors along this business here the shots have come from this direction, so we're going to go check out this area now. And the cop goes inside, and before he comes back out, less than half a minute later, the evidence is sitting there for him to get it. That's a professional thing to me. That's well done. But that's all theory. Again, I have to emphasize what I've just said is just a guess, because we don't have evidence that would support that. The evidence we do have simply suggests that they made an arrest of a guy that, if it was planted evidence, the evidence was there, and so we got him. My argument is, and why I think the theory is worth considering, is that, are you kidding? A lone gunman goes and pulls this off? This guy who escaped from prison suddenly had all this money to go buy cars and travel across the globe? No way. I mean, there's just no way. And he buys a weapon, and he does it in a way, but what he does is he buys the weapon, a weapon, in Birmingham, leaves, then decides to come back and say, I don't want this weapon that I bought, I want this other one. Now, mind you, and he knows that he needs to lay low, he's an escaped prisoner, but yet he's going to go through all this exercise. Who's the salesperson going to remember? The guy who brought the damn thing back and had to exchange it for a weapon that was essentially the same thing. Why is he doing that? It doesn't make any sense. So it suggests that I'm having him do this because I want that retail person to remember who he was, so they can validate that he is the suspect. He's the guy.
Can I go out?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
It was well thought out.
Absolutely.
They have all the time in the world,
Right. And if you know enough about police operations, you know enough about public relations, about that there is going to be enormous pressure to get a suspect. We think, okay, somebody perpetrates a crime. That's a sign of police failure. Police have nothing to do with preventing a crime. Nothing. They know nothing about security. Nothing. But we hold them accountable as if, well, you see, you guys failed. They breached security and they killed someone or they robbed someone. No, the job of the law enforcement agency is to enforce the law. When a law is broken, conduct an investigation, then go find a suspect, right? But that's not how the public deals with it. And then we look at, well, I want that bad guy caught right now. And so the pressure is heavy on them to have someone and to say, see, we solved it. We're the good guys. We're the heroes.
So they took all the bait.
They took all the bait. And so did the news media.
Right.
I mean, and it's just
they want a quick summation of the story. Yeah.
Well, it's just they don't have the experience like Colonel Prouty, who is saying, look, I've been involved in these. This is what goes into it. And it's amazing. I think he's passed away by now, but I'm surprised he wasn't killed because he knew too much. It is just that when you do know those things, you
think Ruby was a plant to kill JFK's assassin?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
And he died of cancer, quote unquote, while in prison.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And the people who are, as I said, I'd be an outside contractor. Mind you, if you are involved in this kind of stuff, I don't want the agency to know who I am.
Right. Yeah.
So, everybody's disguising because if you're involved in a plot as such, whoever is at the head is going to want to kill everybody who was involved so they can't talk.
Right. We don't know about the contractors that were killed and died as a result of knowing too much.
Right.
Okay, I've asked everyone to.
It's all theory.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I've asked everyone to unmute so we can thank Sal for another presentation. And don't miss next week, the final episode.
Yes.
Thank you, Sal.
Thank you, Sal.
Thank you.
I sent you out I didn't do a poem today because the one I have is too long, but I think you need to hear, and that is my goodness, I don't have what's his name? Kendrick, is it Kendrick Lamar, who wrote I got inside my DNA. Anyway, it's a poem. It's lyrics to a song, and he won a Pulitzer Prize for it. And I think these are very sophisticated lyrics. But what you see is he's saying, you see the killing, the drug abuse, alcohol. See, it's in my DNA. That's why we do. That's why Black people do it, because it's in our DNA. He is highlighting the ludicrousness of that. And if it's not in my DNA, then why is that stuff happening? Can we not look deeper into it? I think it's very powerful. So I'll send that out to you. Okay, everybody, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sal.
Thank you.
Hi, Carol.
Hey.
Ann, hi, Ann.
Hi.
Did you go to the Fox Center's, lectures this year?
I signed up for the Jasper Johns one, and then the teacher was sick 2 times, and then it got extended, but I had to miss the last 2 classes because I had another conflict. When it got extended, it wasn't something I planned. So it wasn't one of my more successful classes, but I like to try to take something each semester. I haven't seen you in a class there for a long time.
Yeah, I still am leery about being in that close confine with people because, the classroom's a small room and a lot of people close together. I'm still leery of that.
Yeah, they did start back this year doing it in person. So,
Okay, everybody, be safe. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sal. We'll see you then.
Thank you. I'm working on my book.
Good.
I'm up to France, and I'm enjoying it.
Len, what are you doing down in you're not in your apartment?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, my Chromebook stopped being able to utilize the Zoom platform. Google withdrew their support for Zoom on the Chromebook because they're trying to get their own platform called Google Meeting or Meetup to be their standard. So I had to come down to a community room in the complex I live in to utilize their computer and so forth. So I've been kind of stumbling through the protocol required to get it set up. I missed about half of the French Impressionism presentation, but then I managed to get it going. So I had a question. Are all of these classes that Sal has done and that others are done, they say recording. Can I access that via a link and watch it later? How is that available?
Yeah, Bill sent that out to
Well,
everyone
you're home. I couldn't
about
remember
a month
exactly when
ago.
you came home
And we put them on, they're put on YouTube under a playlist. So you can go back and watch those. Do you remember that? Did you see that?
I guess if I look in my Gmail, he has my Gmail address.
Right.
It would be, it would have been sent to that, and I can pick up the URL link from there. Is that what you're saying?
Right, right.
Oh, okay, very good. I think I do remember seeing a Gmail that addressed that issue.
well, thank you very much.
Like anything else these days, we have information overload. I get so many Gmails that I need a contractor to deal with just Gmail.
Right.
Thank you, George.
I'll resend it to you, Len, in case, because a lot of people said they didn't get it.
Oh, if you can do that, I would appreciate it. That would be at the top of my inbox pile, so to speak. I'd be able to pick it up easily.
Because when I first saw it, it said Kingsbridge on it.
Yeah.
But I said, oh, I didn't know Kingsbridge, became members, but I didn't see many people in there. So
Right.
that's kind of
At the
strange.
end of the session, I was able to change the Kingsbridge label to my name. So that's when it became, oh, that's who it is.
Well, and you might want to invite some of your friends in there, and that'd be a good way for them to see how good Suga classes are.
Let's see now, next week, next Thursday is the last session for this semester?
Right.
I will take your suggestion and talk to the activities director here, and perhaps they can put out a bulletin which would alert people to the availability of the last session. It would be kind of a good marketing approach for next sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could do it with the, the Tuesday classes as well, and impression.
Tuesday and Thursday next week would be the last sessions of this semester. Yeah. Thank you for suggesting that.
Yeah. And in this email that I'll send you, we've been recording the Wednesday in person with Dave Conley and the Webb Telescope. And then Friday, Jeff Milstein, and you know how good Jeff is on the Smithsonian and the Shakers. And that's really fascinating.
So they would be available as well in the link you're going to send me?
Exactly.
Very good. Okay, fine. I appreciate that, and I'll see what I can do to put up an announcement that would be available for people to view.
Super.
Good.
Well, we went on George Brown's England trip.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was terrific. And which one were you on? Were you the South Dakota or Nova Scotia, you and Marcia?
I was on the one to Nova Scotia, Cape Breton and Halifax, and it was a great trip.
Oh, yeah. Well, they do such a great job and everything. But I said to George, I'm interested now in a closer one, like we did South Dakota, Nova Scotia. And he said he's thinking of doing one to Kentucky.
Oh, really?
And doing the Bourbon Trail and the Horseshoe Downs. And evidently there's a Quaker village in Kentucky called Pleasant Hill.
Yeah.
That Jeff Milstein mentioned in his class last week. And so I'm going to mention that to George because they have facilities where we could stay there even. So I think it'd be a great trip. And
I presume if George cooks up anything in the future, would be on. He would tell us about it via an email to like a broadcast email to everyone in our organization.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things I've been looking into, and I haven't really implemented yet, is Rhodes Scholar.
Right.
I sent away for their catalog, and they have, you know, many trips and activities that you can select from. Just another portal, you might say, into potential activity for seniors with a lot of time on their hands.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, several, you know, Gretchen Turner, Bill Beeson's wife, she's done a lot of the Rhodes Scholars.
Really?
And yeah, there's quite a few that I've heard that that like that. So, but it's good.
Yeah, I think your idea of perhaps getting George interested in doing something, you might say local, USA, local. I'm kind of antsy about the extended air travel situation, although the pandemic seems to be burning out, if you will, but there are still people that are dying every day, maybe 300-400 people. So,
I know.
You know, kind of makes me nervous.
And you know, the airlines are getting more expensive and the services are getting worse. Our flight on Delta over there was horrible.
I would imagine it'd be torture.
Yeah, the food was crappy and they're not even using silverware. Now it's bamboo ware, you know, disposable bamboo ware. And oh, it was terrible.
Last time I took a flight was some time ago. The snacks that they served had sort of deteriorated to 4 peanuts wrapped in a cellophane bag.
Right. How do I know?
Did you